Hey everyone, and welcome to the Westfield Insurance Studio Theater at the Idea Center at Playhouse Square in downtown Cleveland. I'm Andy Chow, a reporter with the Ohio Public Radio and Television State House News Bureau in Columbus. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to American Graduate Talking Jobs with Ohio's Next Governor. American Graduate is public media's long-term commitment to help young people succeed in school, career, and life by supporting community-based solutions. That includes national and local reporting, town halls, and public forums like this one, Talking Jobs. So now let's jump right in and welcome Richard Cordray, Democratic candidate for governor. Rich, good to see you. Have a seat. Richard Cordray is a native Ohioan born and raised in Grove City near Columbus. He served as Ohio's Attorney General and Ohio Treasurer before that. And over the last 5 years, Cordray served as the first ever director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. This was a position he was appointed to by President Barack Obama. So, Rich, welcome.
My pleasure, Andy.
All right. Well, before we dive right in, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Mary Fecteau, who will be part of today's event. Hey, Mary.
Thanks, Andy. Today's forum is a collaboration between 3 public television stations in Ohio, CET in Cincinnati, WOSU in Columbus, and WVIZ here in Cleveland. Now, the whole point of what we're doing today is to get you to talk to him about your career dreams and ambitions. So get out those phones and start asking away. Send us your questions via Twitter using the hashtag TalkJobsOH or through our live stream at cetconnect.org/talkjobs, ideastream.org/talkjobs, and wosu.org/talkjobs. Andy?
All right, Rich, so we have people submitting questions from all around the state, young people who want to know what you would do as governor when it comes to jobs. But before we jump into all that, I wanted to ask you, when you were young, when you were growing up in Ohio, what was your first job?
My first job was at McDonald's, as is true of a lot of young people. I made minimum wage, and I flipped burgers, and I dressed buns, and I dealt with the fries and the apple pies, and I cleaned the parking lot when it was raining. Seemed like a lot. So that was my first job.
So they put you to work. They
did. They did, yeah.
So where'd you go on before that, after that?
Well, I've done a lot of things over the course of my life. I worked with, I worked in legal jobs. I worked as a professor at Ohio State Law School. I was in and out of government. I served in the legislature and later as state treasurer and state attorney general. I was, as you said, appointed by President Obama to look after consumers in the financial marketplace, and that was my most recent job. And I would say my most interesting, rewarding, challenging job, looking after 320 million Americans across this country to stand on their side and see that they're treated fairly every day. So, that was good work.
So from flipping burgers to being appointed to a job by the president. It's pretty cool.
Yep.
All right, well, let's jump right into the questions. As I said, they've been submitted from all over the state. Isaac from Circleville via the web says, if elected, what would your administration do to appeal to businesses to come to Ohio and create jobs?
Okay, that's a great question, and it's something that a governor needs to do and do well. I will say, first of all, that we need to have a pipeline of talent here in Ohio that companies can feel confident that they want to hire people with the right skills to fill those jobs. And so workforce development is incredibly important for us. Getting more additional skills beyond K through 12 is important. And that can be a variety of things. It could mean going to college. It can also mean there's a lot of pathways to the middle class in Ohio that don't involve going to college, apprenticeship programs, certification programs, more skills training. Our community colleges are providing tremendous avenues for young people, either to a 2-year degree or maybe the first 2 years of a 4-year degree. So there's a lot of things that we can do there. I also believe, I frankly believe that we need to become a more progressive state. If we're seen as an intolerant, exclusive state that is unwelcoming, then businesses won't want to bring their workforce here. And I think our young people won't want to stay here. And I think that's really important, that we step into our future, that we become more progressive, more welcoming, more diverse, more inclusive, more tolerant as a state. And I think that matters to the business climate here as well as it matters to how we treat each other in our communities.
Well, Kelly from Fremont also submitted a question via the web. She says, how do you propose modernizing our antiquated education system to meet the present day needs of the job market?
It's an excellent question, too. I don't think that we do enough with computer education in this state. I've seen that we lag behind the rest of the country on that. I think that we need to reduce some of the very, very heavy standardized testing that gets in the way of teachers and students learning from one another in the classroom, and teachers being able to teach the way they're trained to do. So I think that that needs to be reformed. I think there's a lot of unfunded mandates that Columbus puts on our schools and puts on the classroom that make it difficult for education to thrive in this state. I also think that we've had a failed experiment with some of these charter schools that have failed our children, and that we need to flunk the failing charter schools and get that money back into the classroom to support our teachers and our children. So there's a number of things that we need to do there, but modernizing our school funding formula, a variety of things that I actually think we can get bipartisan support in the legislature to work forward on education reform. Everybody understands how important this is. Everybody understands that this is how we fashion the future in Ohio, and I think that we can make progress on that.
Wyatt from Cincinnati, also via the web, says, what is your plan? So this is also when it comes to education. What is your plan to make a high school diploma mean something again?
Well, again, to me, it's not just a matter of high-stakes testing. I mean, we take a lot of tests over the course of K through 12, and then we get out into the workforce, and suddenly we're not taking tests anymore. We're doing something different. We're working together as teams. We're understanding the concept to solve problems together and to meet challenges together. I think that we could recast what we're doing in the classroom better suited to being around a diploma that means you're ready for the workforce in Ohio. And having the right skills and skills training is important. And I think that we can have businesses work with our schools to make sure that the curriculum is updated and is fitted to the skills of today. By the way, virtually every workplace now, whether it's manufacturing or clerical or whatever it may be, is computerized. And so we need to have the skills to be able to recognize that there's nothing really advanced about that anymore. That's standard. And we need to make sure that our schools are keeping up and our teachers have the ability to teach as they know how to do.
Well, the next question is a video question that Mary's going to introduce to us.
So our next question is about money, and it's one that many of you are asking. Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Ray from Columbus. A lot of students are supporting themselves through college through minimum wage jobs. My question is, would you support the rise in minimum wage?
Was that Rich from Columbus?
Ray.
Ray from Columbus, okay. Thought I had another Rich there. So, I would support a rise in the minimum wage. I think that the last time we did this, we had to go to the ballot, go to the people to do it in 2006, I believe it was. I supported it then. We did raise the minimum wage. The public supported that. I think we can do that again and probably will need to do that again. And I think that it would be timely because I believe that if you pay people fairly for working hard, and plenty of people work very hard in this state and make minimum wage, and many of them work not just one but 2 or even 3 jobs and still have a hard time making ends meet. If you pay people fairly for work, then I think we will grow our economy, and I think families will be able to thrive, and I think our state will be better off. People have debated the minimum wage for years, and I don't agree that it necessarily costs jobs. It depends, it's situational, but I think we're at a time right now where raising the minimum wage would be a positive for our economy in Ohio.
When it comes to minimum wage, sometimes there's a discussion about should there be age limits. So maybe should there be a certain minimum wage for teenagers and then a different one for adults who are 18 or 21. Have you ever thought about that or given that any thought?
I think a lot of people have thought about that. I tend to think if people are working hard and they are contributing productively, that they should be paid the same wage, and it shouldn't necessarily be biased based on whether you're young or old, and it shouldn't be biased at all, certainly based on whether you're female or male. People who work hard deserve to be paid fairly, and that should be true of all Americans.
Right. Christina from Columbus via the web says, why does it seem that we can only work at fast food restaurants and places like Kroger when we're minors?
Well, I don't think that there's anything that makes you unable to work elsewhere, but it's difficult to get hired, isn't it? It's difficult to get hired depending on what kind of skills you can bring to the table. Look, again, I was saying to Andy earlier, my trajectory was I started off in fast food. It's a place that a lot of people nowadays start out in that industry when they're in their teens. And you learn skills there. You learn skills about working hard. You learn skills about being part of a team. You learn skills about sometimes biting your lip when you're given instructions that you think don't make sense, and you have to be able to find a way to work in the workplace nonetheless. But I would say that sky's the limit as far as I'm concerned for young people today. And particularly those who can get computer skills and good communication skills, reading and writing skills. There's an awful lot of jobs you can do. I will just illustrate this a little bit by being in a political campaign. In a political campaign, you don't care whether people are young or old. You don't care what their background is. You just want people who are going to be contributing and productive. And we have lots of people doing lots of different jobs in our campaign, many of them very young, many of them very effective.
Angelique from Columbus via the web says, Richard Cordray, you talk about putting workers first. How will that help Ohioans get the skills they need to secure good paying jobs?
So workforce development is incredibly important, and having the right programs so that we are making sure that people are exposed to skills training of all kinds is really important in our society. But I'll say another word about the fair pay for fair work issue. My opponent, Mike DeWine, is the Attorney General of this state. He made it a priority a few years ago to oppose an overtime rule that the Obama administration had put forward, a rule that would say that if you're asked to come in early or stay late even after working a full-time week, that you would have to be paid fairly for overtime for working more than 40 hours in a week. It wasn't a handout, it was just fair pay for fair work. Mike DeWine used our taxpayer money to bring a lawsuit against that rule and managed to have it set aside. There's 327,000 Ohioans not getting overtime pay today that they deserve, even though they're working overtime because of that action. I think that was fundamentally wrong.
All right, well, Dominic is hitting us up with a question via Twitter. Says, Ohio is probably one of the most diverse states in the union with contradictory economic interests, which means it's hard to guarantee that all regions receive adequate support. So how can we guarantee that job growth isn't concentrated in any one region?
That's a great question. It's something I've been thinking very hard about, because as you go around the state and you hear what's on people's minds and you think about being governor and what can I do to improve people's lives, a big issue for a lot of people is access to affordable health care. That's a major issue for pretty much everyone in every family in Ohio. Getting better skills in education and training, as we've been talking about already here, is very important too. But a third thing that I stress a lot is how can we spread out more opportunity to everybody in Ohio so that no one is left out or left behind. First of all, nobody should be excluded in Ohio. Nobody should be discriminated against. We shouldn't push behind anybody with talent in Ohio. We should embrace everyone with talent. But more than that, how do you spread out opportunities so that it's not just in a few places, that it really gets to everybody in this state? And among the things that I have put forward are that we should be supporting more of our small and medium-sized businesses who are located throughout Ohio. That will help us share prosperity. A second thing is that infrastructure, rebuilding our roads and bridges, and I include in that investing in public transit, which is really important, and Ohio has no funding for that right now. And access to broadband across the state. It's been promised for years, but not delivered. These are all things that will help spread out opportunity across the state. And another thing that I talk about is that the local communities send a lot of money to Columbus, and it hasn't been coming back to the local communities to help support the economy there and help support local services, even at a time when we know we're having to fight an opioid crisis that is quite overwhelming for many communities across the state. All of those things will help us move money around the state and improve opportunity around the state. I think a lot of us love living in the various towns in Ohio that have great quality of life, but there has to be opportunity to sustain it. That's something I'll work hard on as governor.
People around the state are submitting their questions via the web, via Twitter. Delando from Columbus via the web says, what do you think is the most important skill for the workforce, and how do you plan to instill those skills in Ohio?
You know, that's a hard question, because depending on where you are in the workforce, different skills are of different importance. I mean, it's just not an easy question to answer. But one thing I do say when people ask me, you know, what should I be focused on in high school? What should I major in college if I'm on the college path? And I tend to say, whatever you do, reading and writing and being able to communicate and speaking is so important, because in every workplace, as I said before, you don't really work as an isolated individual, you work as part of a team. And being able to effectively be part of a team and communicate both hearing and listening, but also speaking and conveying your thoughts becomes really important to the contribution you can make. So I would say that whatever other skills you're getting, and obviously people need very specific skills for different places in the workplace, being able to communicate well and learning to do that and working on that and thinking about that is really a universal talent and a universal skill that you can use in all the workplaces. Whether or not you change jobs, whether or not you change fields, it'll still be valuable to you.
So how do we instill that in young people? Does that start in the schools?
It starts in the schools. By the way, it starts in early childhood. I think that we should have early childhood learning programs, and we should do more of that in Ohio. We are currently last among the 50 states in terms of spending on children's services. That's unbelievable, really, isn't it? That Ohio is last among the 50 states in spending on children's services. And particularly children aged 0 through 5. Many of them get to K through 12, they get to kindergarten, and they're already well behind their peers. And the statistics show about 40% of young people at age 5 aren't ready for kindergarten, and they also show that about 40% come out of 12th grade not ready for the workforce. There's a direct correlation between those two. So I have said that we need to do much more on early childhood learning in Ohio, more home visits, more child care support, more intervention with expecting pregnant mothers so that they can get off to a fast start from the get-go. And you know, if you don't have a good support system, that's a scary thing and a difficult thing, being a newly pregnant mother or a working parent. The other thing we need is we need universal pre-K around the state. We've been working on that in a few parts of the state, Dayton, Cincinnati, and here in Cuyahoga County. There's much more we can do, and we will do, and that's an important investment for us to make.
All right, sounds like we have another video question, Mary.
That's right. Next up, we have a question regarding higher education opportunities for minorities. Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Harry, and I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. And my question for the future governor is, what action do you plan on taking to make college a possibility for minorities and young adults living in the inner cities?
There's a lot of questions along this line about
Sure.
student debt as well.
Sure, absolutely. By the way, I'm learning. I didn't swing 270 degrees around. I took the shortcut that time. And I appreciate that question, and it's on a lot of people's minds. And not just young people, but often people in midlife who've decided they need to get more skills and they need to go back and get more education. And one of the problems that we have in Ohio is that we've allowed ourselves to fall back in terms of college affordability. We're now the 45th state out of the 50 in terms of college affordability. And to have our young people, particularly our best young people, our brightest young people who go on to college, end up coming out of college with this huge millstone around their neck in the form of massive student loan debt is really going to hold us back for years to come in this state. So we need more investment in higher education in Ohio. But there's other things we can do as well. When I was at the Consumer Bureau in Washington, we worked on the student loan and student debt issues. We helped clarify for people what their choices were, how they could better compare choices of schools and choices of grants and loans, and exactly what they would owe when they got out and what that degree would be worth, and really trying to make hard-headed good decisions ahead of time. And this is hard for families, particularly if they've never sent a child to college before, or maybe they've done it once, maybe they've done it twice. They're not experts. The state can be more helpful at helping people strategize that and figure out how to optimize loans and grants so that they can be in the best possible financial situation to make the most of that. We're also working and need to work even harder to provide more programs so that you can start to build college credits while still in high school, which lowers the cost and moves you forward. It is also the case that in Ohio, we're getting better at, and we still have more work to do, that if you start at a community college and then you decide you want to end up going for a 4-year degree, or even if you start with that in mind, that you can do 2 years more affordably at a community college than transfer to get your degree, the 2+2 programs. Those are important too. But the other thing we need to do is we need to be able to crack down and enforce loan servicers who often hurt people in terms of how they repay their loans. They don't give them a fair treatment in terms of how they apply the loans to the debts so as it minimizes the cost for people. And my opponent has been the Attorney General of the state. He made it a point to allow debt collectors for the state to tack on charges for student loan debt. If you owed money to the state of Ohio, they've been able to tack on as much as 45% more. and make it harder for you to repay your debt. That just adds to the millstone around students' necks. I think that was wrong and was not appropriate, and he should not have done that.
You know, a question that comes along, getting into the heads of young people about to graduate high school, an idea is that to make college more affordable, maybe go to a cheaper, more an inexpensive 2-year school. But I think there's this fear that a degree from that school doesn't carry as much weight for a future employer. Do you have any thoughts or advice on that?
It actually depends very much, and this is something where, again, people need better guidance and better ability to navigate with clear eyes what choices they're making. There's quite a few community college programs I've seen around the state that are really first rate, and they are very, very specialized. For example, at Sinclair Community College in Dayton, they have a lot of aerospace programs. They're near the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and that's not just piloting a plane anymore, but it's working with drones, which are becoming a more significant part of the workforce than certainly was true 10 years ago and in this generation, and will be even more so. So again, depending on what the program is, there can be extra value there or there can be less, and it's important for people to be able to know that and size that up. It's the cost of what you spend, and it's the benefit and the value added that you're going to receive that together help you make good choices.
Ian from Cincinnati via the web says, schools are paid for by taxes. What commitment are you willing to make to continue paying for career tech schools?
For career tech schools?
For career tech,
yeah. I think that's really important. I guess what I've said, and maybe I could boil it down a little bit, is that we need pathways to the middle class in Ohio whether or not you go to college. And for some people, college is the right answer, and that's great for those for whom it works. Sometimes people get pushed into the college track, and they're going to end up taking on a lot of debt, and they might have found that had they known, they would have made a different choice. Career tech school can be a very good path for people if they pick up very specific skills that are going to advantage them in the workplace for a long time. We have great apprenticeship programs in Ohio. Those skills people are taking with them throughout their lives, and they're getting paid good wages, and there's opportunities for advancement into management and leadership if they want to do that. We have certification programs. We can have skills training. We can have a whole flexible spectrum of different things that are suited for different people, and then help people understand what their choices are, what the menu is, and try some different things out as they go. So that you can not just get pigeonholed into one path and stuck on that path, even though it may not be working for you or isn't best for your long-term future.
We have a question coming in from Twitter. Jordan from Columbus asks, Rich Cordray, I see you have a plan to make community college free. How would that work, and how can our state afford that?
Yeah, I've come to think the word free is not necessarily the best word on that, because it sounds like a handout, and it's not. But if you look at states like Tennessee and New Jersey, what they have done is they've recognized that families often don't know how to optimize the grants and loans that are available, particularly from the federal government. And we want to make sure we can pull every dollar down that advances young people's education. And that if we do that, then it becomes much more affordable to make up the difference in terms of getting a 2-year degree from a community college in Ohio, and this again was true in New Jersey and Tennessee, and it's not that expensive to make up that difference. So I've committed, and my running mate, that this is something we want to do in Ohio, and that would be enormously advantageous for young people, because again, either it's a 2-year degree with a defined set of skills and a lot of skills training on the way, or it's 2 years toward a 4-year degree at a much more affordable rate, and this starts to make the whole equation work better for a lot of Ohio families.
Kylia from Columbus via the web says, she's asking, how can we get businesses more engaged and invested in workforce skill training at the middle school and high school level?
So businesses in Ohio are very much understanding the importance of this, and they're really calling out quite a bit now for the fact that we have a skills gap in our state that everybody is frustrated by. We have people who want to work, but they don't have the right skills to be hired for the jobs that are available. And we have businesses that want to hire people, but they can't find people with the right skills to fill the jobs that they have. That's a mismatch, and obviously it's not something that anybody really wants to see happen, and it's not being planned for very well. And there's more we can do to understand and figure that out, and there's some states that are doing better than we are on that, and we can learn from them. But businesses recognize now that they are having a harder and harder time finding the right skilled people for those jobs. And they're willing to do a certain amount of training themselves, but they'd like to know that the state of Ohio is going to step up and do more in terms of workforce development and skills training, and I believe the state of Ohio can. Again, we can do it by investing in our community colleges, we can do it by strengthening our apprenticeship and certification programs, and we can do it by taking some of the money we're giving in terms of tax breaks to companies to come here and investing it instead in our workforce here, as my running mate Betty Sutton and I would say, putting workers first and making sure they have the skills, and then businesses will want to come, because that's the thing that they need the most.
So Governor John Kasich in the past few years has kind of tried that a little bit, trying to integrate the private sector in with schools, and there was somewhat of a pushback from teachers. So when you are looking at trying to mix businesses and local companies with schools, how do you get buy-in from teachers and the local school administrators?
Well, I think that there's whenever you have change, there's initially a little bit of pushback against the change. But this is something we really need to do. I think Governor Kasich has taken it a bit in that direction. I think there's more that we can do. And I think that everybody in Ohio needs to understand, and it starts with leadership from the governor, that we need to have people with the right skills to fill these jobs. Again, it's so frustrating to have people who are out of work, they want to work, and there's just a skills gap that they can't quite get across, that bridge that gap. That's something that we need to do, and both educators and businesses, I think, are recognizing that more and more, and with the right leadership, we can put these kind of difficulties aside.
This is kind of along the same lines. Garrett from Perrysburg is asking through Twitter, you say the best way to grow the economy is with more job training programs. How will you be able to help the students that are in public schools that do not have job training programs already available to them through those public schools?
Well, again, I think we need to do more job training in the public schools. That's a beginning point. Then I think that we can supplement that with apprenticeship programs that may or may not be connected specifically with a school. And we have some good ones to build on in Ohio. But again, I think that this needs to be integrated into the schools better. And vocational training, which we used to spend a lot of time and effort on in Ohio, and we should do more of that again. But I also think that, you know, as children get on the path and they grow up and they go through K through 12, and then they're looking for further skills, which is again where we're falling behind in Ohio. That's where we need these programs to be. So.
San Lee from Cleveland via Twitter asks, I am an international student from Vietnam. What policies could you suggest to encourage employers to hire more international employees?
So, Ohio has always been a welcoming state historically, and America has been a welcoming country. And all of us can think back to our ancestry, and people came here from around the world, sometimes willingly, sometimes unwillingly, but often because they could see that there was opportunity in America and the potential for freedom, and they believed in our values. And I think that's still true of people who come here from around the world. And we need to recognize that people who want to bring their talents here and share their lives with us and join our communities, what better compliment could we pay to this country and this society than to welcome them and to make sure that we don't bar them based on prejudice or bigotry, which my sense is that the young people of your generation have less of than any American generation we've ever seen before. And I get a lot of inspiration from talking with you and your peers around the state, because I think that you are more progressive, you're willing to treat people just fairly based on one human being to another and not let other things get in the way. And I think that we need leadership in this state that feels the same way. And that's very much how I feel. One of the most impressive and enjoyable things I've done over the course of my time in public service is to attend and speak at naturalization ceremonies of new citizens who have gone through the process to join the United States of America and essentially, you know, be sort of wedded to this country. And those are really encouraging ceremonies, because they represent that people have put a lot of time and effort into joining us in our society. And why shouldn't we want that? Why shouldn't we welcome that? And the policies coming out of Washington that would divide us and pit people against one another are wrong. They do nothing to solve our problems. They just make things harder in our communities. And I think we need to set a different tone in Ohio, and I'm committed to doing that as your governor.
Jenna from Lakewood is on Twitter, and it's kind of a two-parter here. College kids depend on internships, almost all of them are unpaid, to get work experience, ultimately favoring students from high-income families. So, how do you feel about unpaid internships, and do you pay your interns?
So, how do I feel about unpaid internships? I had a few over the course of my lifetime. I had one that was very formative for me. It was an unpaid internship in U.S. Senator John Glenn's office in Washington. And everybody wanted to work for John Glenn. You know him. He was the U.S. Astronaut who was history making at multiple times during his career. I got a lot out of that situation. Obviously, people would prefer to be paid, and there's more opportunity. You can be limited. A lot of people aren't able to afford an unpaid internship. I remember having difficulty. That was a quarter that I was in college. With that, I was having to pay tuition, but also I was being unpaid for the work I was doing. We do pay lots of people in our campaign, and then there's some people who are willing to volunteer. I wouldn't call them interns per se, but just people who are willing to volunteer because they want to change our state for the better. We welcome them all. We pay those that we can, and I'm thinking I also had an unpaid internship on a campaign early on. I wasn't very good at getting myself paid, I guess, but I learned a lot from that, and I benefited a lot from it. And so, for each individual, it's just a question of what's going to be the best experience for you, what can you afford to do. At the same time, as I said, I worked at McDonald's for a period of time around that same age, and I didn't make a lot of money at McDonald's. It was $2.30 an hour. Think about that. That didn't go very far, very fast. And I worked hard when I was working at McDonald's. So again, different mixes of experience for different people at different times. Sometimes you can handle an unpaid internship for a short period of time, but you can learn a lot. It's worth thinking about.
All right. It's time to go back to Mary, who has another video question.
Okay, our next question is on everyone's favorite subject, testing.
Hi, my name's Ariana. I'm from Cincinnati, and I attend Diamond Oaks, one of Great Oaks' career campuses, as a health technology student. In recent years, more and more of school has been dedicated to state testing. This year, I have been pulled from my medical training on several occasions to be tested. What are your thoughts as to the value of this testing?
So I touched on this a little bit before, but I'll go a little deeper. I happen to think that high-stakes testing is not the best way to bring young people along and help them nurture and develop their potential. It is a way that has been used more and more in Ohio for a number of years. And what it now has added up to is there's a lot of time out of the classroom to administer and take the tests. You know, even better than I, that there's also an awful lot of time that's devoted in the classroom to preparing for the tests. Teachers feel obliged to teach to the test because they're being graded based on the results of the test. And it really narrows the curriculum, and it really kind of constrains the ability in the classroom to create that magic between teacher and student that teachers have been trained to provide. And some teachers are better than others. Some of us in every walk of life are better than others. But we all can think about in your lives, teachers that you had who inspired you, who encouraged you, who brought you along. It typically wasn't around particular tests that you took. It was around the creative process and helping open your mind and your imagination to what you could do, helping encourage you. And the high-stakes testing often discourages students. It often causes people to think, gee, I can't do that. And it pushes them toward more of a dropout mentality or a failure mentality. I don't see how that's necessarily helping our young people. And I'd like to see us do less of that, and I'd like to see us spend more time in the classroom engaging between teachers and students the way that I know that when I think back on the teachers that inspired me, how they did it. And it had very little to do with testing.
Caitlin from Columbus via the web asks, in Ohio, we have around 100,000 and growing clean energy jobs and around 33,000 and declining jobs in coal. So what's your plan to transition the state to renewables?
So we have a great state for energy, and we have a whole variety of different kinds of energy in the state, and I have said we should pursue an all of the above energy strategy. Now, at the same time, you can see where the market is going. The market is moving in the direction of renewables, wind and solar, and to some extent biomass. This is where the rest of the country is moving. This is where the rest of the world is moving. This is where the jobs of the future are. And we have been holding ourselves back in Ohio. We've had policies that have made it harder for us to step into the future with wind and solar. Even so, as you just said, we have over 100,000 jobs in those industries. But it seems to me that we can do more. And at the same time, if other sources of energy are working in the marketplace, and lately liquid natural gas and natural gas, which is a much cleaner fuel, is becoming more plentiful in eastern Ohio. Whatever we can do to keep our utility bills down, which benefits businesses, makes us more competitive, it also helps homeowners and consumers, is the right answer for Ohio, I believe. So we will continue to see as we go, but there's no question in my mind that Ohio has hurt itself in the last few years by not stepping into the future with renewable energy, and we've been losing those jobs to places like Iowa and Michigan, and I don't like to see that. I think we could be much more aggressive around this.
If there are more wind plants coming, more solar plants coming, then do we need to relook at the kind of education that we're offering students so they can be ready for those types of jobs to fill the need then?
Well, it goes without saying that educating young people has to keep up with the evolving nature of the economy and the changing nature of the workplace. But to me, we not only should be developing more wind and solar energy in Ohio, but the component parts that we manufacture for the wind turbines and the solar panels, we should be attracting more of that to Ohio. And by the way, the other side of this that a lot of people don't realize is it's not just the jobs in the energy sector itself. It's that there's a lot of companies now that are deciding where to locate around the country, and they want to know that they have a clean, dependable source of energy for a long time to come. The pricing will be more dependable because it's based on wind and sun, which are constant resources. So there are a lot of other companies like Amazon, and their workforce, point of principle, they want more clean, renewable energy to be consumed by that company. So if we don't have this, if we're not stepping into our future in the energy sector, we'll lose out on a lot of other jobs as well. And they'll go elsewhere where people are getting this and understanding it and pushing us forward. There's no reason why we shouldn't push ourselves forward in Ohio, and the governor will have a lot of say over that.
This is along the lines of a video question submitted earlier, but Vermonte from Cleveland via the web says, what's your plan to help bring great jobs to the African American community, and how do you plan to make more colleges affordable to them?
Yeah. So when I talk about spreading opportunity across the state, I'm not just talking about getting outside the big counties into the rural counties. I am talking about that. But I'm also talking about within the big counties, like a county like Cuyahoga or Franklin or Hamilton or Montgomery, Lucas Summit. There are pockets, big pockets of poverty and at-risk young people in the midst of prosperity. We have high urban poverty in Ohio, and it's showing up in things like infant mortality numbers that are disproportionate in the African American community. That's wrong. That should not be the case, but it is the case right now in Ohio. The educational opportunities I'm talking about and getting money back from failing charter schools and so forth needs to be spread throughout our public school system in the minority community as well as the suburban areas. That's really important. And we need to rethink a bit the formula for school funding in this state and thinking about how we can better serve at-risk kids in our urban communities. The other thing about job opportunities is that, again, if we're doing better workforce development, if we're spreading money to small and medium-sized businesses and not just pursuing a few large businesses in Ohio, that will give us more opportunity to open up opportunity to communities that feel left out right now, that feel that they don't have the same chances. And that's important. We need people to be able to participate in this economy and have opportunity. Otherwise, their skills are parked on the sidelines and their talents are parked on the sidelines. We can't afford that in Ohio. We need all 11.8 million Ohioans to participate aggressively in this economy and leave nobody out and nobody behind. And some of that starts with policies in the state government.
And speaking about spreading out opportunities, Amy from Huron via the web says, how do you propose bringing good living wages and good jobs to areas that have mostly seasonal and hospitality jobs? She uses Erie County as an example.
Yeah, so again, first of all, we need to continue to bolster our tourism industry, which is seasonal and hospitality. But when we have Western Lake Erie that is impaired with a toxic algae bloom and the state government's not doing anything significant to fix that, that's a problem in those areas for the existing economy, right? And we need sustainable practices in this state that protect our environment over the long term. That's important. But again, the things that I've talked about, investing in small businesses in this state, firing up our infrastructure and rebuilding our roads and bridges, providing access to broadband, stepping into our future with clean energy jobs and trying to see that those are spread around the state, and getting money back into our local communities that's being taken to Columbus and staying there and not coming back. These are all ways in which we can strengthen our economy in these communities so that it will always be seasonal as well, because there's tourism angles, but we can have a broader based, more lasting economy to build on.
Well, let's check back in with Mary with another video question.
Our next question is about helping non-traditional students find their pathways to success. Let's take a look.
My name is Sarah, and I'm from Cincinnati. I will soon be graduating from Cincinnati State Technical and Community College. I am a single parent, and even getting a 2-year degree has been very hard for me. So my question to you is, what is your vision in providing support for non-traditional students and for working parents so that we can still succeed in higher education and in any other career pathways?
Yeah, thank you for that. What we know in Ohio is we have plenty of families that are headed by a single parent, often a woman, but it could be a man. And we have plenty of other families that are headed by 2 working parents who, again, it's very difficult to juggle everything and meet all your responsibilities. One thing I would say that I think we really need to do in Ohio is we need to provide wraparound services in the schools so that a lot of other things that kids need. There was a time when we didn't pay attention to nutrition among the student population, and then the school lunch program came along to fill that gap and reduced price meals, on the understanding that if kids don't eat right, they're just not going to be able to learn. I mean, it's true of all of us. I mean, it's the fuel that we need. The same is true of other services, health services, mental health services, social services, that families otherwise have to go out and get on their own. And it becomes logistically difficult, and the time isn't available, and a lot of things fall through the cracks, particularly mental health services. So having wraparound services provided at the schools so that we can provide partnerships of the mental health providers and the health providers, and they can do it at the school building where the students are during the day, makes a great deal of sense to me, and that's something we can do to take pressure off of single parents like Sarah. But at the same time, we need to have skills programs that are flexible. Again, flexible in terms of, many people in midlife, or someone like Sarah who is trying to raise a family and deal with that. At the same time, they're trying to get more skills, and they're probably working for a living as well, right? Because how else do you do it? That we need to have those programs available in the community, and they need to be flexibly based and adaptive to people's situations. That is something that is hard work, but it's something that we need to do because she deserves the same chance as everyone else, and it's obviously going to be harder as a single parent than it is for the average person, and we need to recognize that and find ways to lift and ease the load.
We have a little bit of time for one more question. Autumn from Twitter says, what are ways to help the LGBTQ plus community get jobs as well as better care and support?
So, we've made some progress in this country on this issue, notably in this generation, and now people can marry whom they love, and I am very much in favor of that. My opponent actually fought that case all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. I think that was not the right approach. It's still the case, though, in Ohio, that if you are gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender, you can be fired from your job for no other reason than that, or you can lose your housing, or you can lose access to public accommodations. That's wrong. About half the states have said that that's wrong, and they've done that in their laws. We need to do that in Ohio. We need to have, again, I'll just say it again, we need to have a state here and a society here where we're welcoming, diverse, inclusive, and tolerant, and that nobody is being excluded based on reasons that really don't have to do with the human being. They have to do with people's prejudice and bigotry. This is not a state that should give any credence to prejudice and bigotry. This is a state that should live up to our ideals as Americans, and we can do that by having the right people in government who will push and fight hard for these things. But if they don't, then we could go along as we are, and that, to me, that would be a tragedy, because I think we'll lose a lot of people from your generation who won't want to be part of a society like that. And I wouldn't blame you if you felt that way. It's a really important election this year, 2018, because we can, as I've said several times, step into our future, make Ohio a more progressive state, set an example to the nation of how we think we can work together to solve our problems rather than dividing ourselves against one another and pitting people against one another and scapegoating, I was with a minister the other day, and he had a great way to put this. He said, we all know that blowing out somebody else's candle has never made my candle shine brighter. And that's a lesson that we should take to heart and think about it as we elect our next leadership in the state of Ohio. Thank you.
That's all the time we have, but do you have any message to the students in the audience, to the people out there watching? Any final words to the questions they had?
So I think I just gave my final words to the questions they had.
Yeah.
But I will just say that what you do matters. And if you take an interest in this election this year, whether you are old enough to vote or not, you're old enough to influence people. And I believe that if your generation steps up and makes change this year, not 20, 30 years from now, as some people would pat you on the head and say, maybe later. You do it this year, you change Ohio. And if you set that example in changing Ohio, then I believe we change this country. And I think that we really need that, and I think we deserve it, and I think you deserve it most of all. Thank you.
Richard Cordray. Richard Cordray, candidate for governor. On behalf of my colleague Mary and our audience, we thank you for talking with us today. So coming up, Mike DeWine will join us so everyone stay on the live stream, and we'll be here in the next couple of minutes.
So you probably noticed all the really cool art we have around our studio. Well, we're going to show you a little bit about how it was created. Let's take a look.
What's happening? I am Mr. Soul, and I'm here with my partner Daze from the Cleveland Scribe Tribe, and we're painting panels for Talking Jobs at 78th Street Studios. Art can motivate, inspire, educate, and uplift, and it can unify.
Our crew always had a focal point of combat poverty through art.
It said that you can tell the value and the wealth of a society based on the contents of its art.
So we've been beautifying our neighborhoods for a long time.
Being able to pass by a mural or a piece of public art that speaks to their narrative, speaks to their suffering, speaks to their hope, just feel good to be in a space and have that gift to be able to connect like that.
Some of my older mentors and friends, they set the stage for me, a blueprint on how to be an entrepreneur. I am now a mentor of a lot of younger artists. One particular was here today to assist and also to observe and watch and learn and pick up some skills.
Being able to offer them some guidance, some steps, and some resources is a good feeling.
The Talking Jobs project was an awesome and great project to be able to work on.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Westfield Insurance Studio Theater at the Idea Center at Playhouse Square in downtown Cleveland. I'm your host, Andy Chow, reporter with the Ohio Public Radio and State House News Bureau in Columbus. We continue now with our program, Talking Jobs with Ohio's Next Governor. This is an American Graduate Initiative from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. It's now time to put Ohio's Republican candidate for governor on the hot seat. Let's welcome now Republican gubernatorial candidate Mike DeWine. Hi, Andy. Mike, good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Have a seat.
Thank you very much.
All right, Mike is a native Ohioan from Springfield. He has represented Ohio with 4 terms in Congress and 2 terms in the U.S. Senate. He currently serves as Ohio's Attorney General. So, Mike, welcome.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you very much.
Before we dive right into all these questions, I'd like to reintroduce my colleague, Mary Fecto. Hey, Mary.
Thanks, Andy. As a reminder, today's forum is a collaboration between 3 public television stations in Ohio, CET in Cincinnati, WOSU in Columbus, and WVIZ PBS here in Cleveland. In fact, along with our studio audience here, there are watch parties going on in Cincinnati and Columbus, so hello to everyone watching across the Buckeye State. Right now, this is your chance to ask Mike DeWine about your future, your education, your goals, and how you're going to fund that pathway. So get out those phones and start texting us. Send us your questions via Twitter using the hashtag TalkJobsOH or through our live stream at cetconnect.org/talkjobs, ideastream.org/talkjobs, and wosu.org/talkjobs. Andy?
Thanks, Mary. Mike, we've got questions coming in from all around the state. Young people want to know what you do as governor. But first, I wanted to ask you about when you were a little younger, your first job. What was your first job growing up?
Well, I grew up in a family business. It was a small seed company, a wholesale seed company. So, starting there at a real young age, I did some work around the office. And then when I got a little older, I worked out in what we called the mill, the plant. And, it was kind of typical, really before a lot of lift forks. So we were loading bags on boxcars and loading them on trucks to take out to our different customers around the state. And so I really kept that job all the way through college and most of the way through law school. I'd come home at the summer and work.
So you're getting your hands dirty when you weren't going to school. At what point during your college career did you decide that you wanted to go into public service?
Well, I had a kind of interesting college career. I did not do very well in high school. Candidly, I followed my girlfriend to Miami University, and fortunately I got in. And we were actually married between our second and third year at Miami. Fran and I started first grade. She's actually up in the audience, but she was a lot better student than I was. And so she got into Miami. I wasn't sure I was going to get in, but I did, and followed her there. And then by the time we graduated, we had 2 children. So not exactly your typical college experience, but I changed several different times. I started as a business major. I decided that really wasn't what I wanted to do, and so I switched over to education. I actually student taught at Princeton High School, headed down towards Cincinnati for 4.5 months, and really thought I was going to be a teacher, social studies teacher in high school. Decided almost at the last minute that I wanted to try law school to see whether or not I could do that. And I got into law school, and I did well. I actually liked it, and so that's what happened. I went into law, and then I was very fortunate that when I got out of law, actually between my second and third year of law school, my dad said, you'd probably, since you're not going into the business, you need to kind of do something else and get some practical legal experience. So I was a law clerk for the summer, intern, just did a bunch of different things for a lawyer, but that lawyer ended up getting elected the next year as the prosecuting attorney of our home county. Fran and I live in Greene County, that's where we were raised. And so when I got through law school, passed the bar exam, then I was named as an assistant prosecuting attorney for him. And it was kind of a life-changing experience because you learn so much in a prosecutor's office. I often tell young people, if you're interested in going into the law, think about, at least for a couple years, going into a prosecuting attorney's office, because you're really thrown directly into into that work. And first day I showed up, they threw me a file and said, go down in the basement and you represent Children's Services. And one of the things that really impacted me, I think, a lot is the fact that in representing Children's Services, you see all the child abuse cases, you see just the horrible, horrible things, and it's something frankly, you can never forget. But within 3 months after I had passed the bar, I was trying major felony cases. And so anyway, a little recommendation, if anyone's thinking about going to law school and you graduate from law school, think about the fact that you could get a job as a prosecutor's office, and either in a big city or a small community, and you're going to learn a lot real quick.
Well, let's jump right in. Robbie from Chagrin Falls via the web is asking, and this is what we're talking about. We're talking about jobs. How do you plan on bringing more jobs to Ohio?
Well, that's kind of the big
one,
question. Yeah. We're doing better today than we were doing 8 years ago. We lost 350,000 jobs. We've gotten those back. We have moved forward, but certainly we're not where we could be. And as I look at the challenges facing Ohio, I think a lot of it comes back to education. If you look at what businessmen and women say when they talk about jobs, they tell you our biggest problem is finding people who have the requisite skill sets to handle the job. And the other big problem we have is the drug problem. We have people who are not really ready or can't work because they can't pass a drug test. So focusing a lot on education is very important. I mean, our ultimate goal, my goal, and my running mate John Huston's goal is for every child in the state, when they graduate from high school, to be truly college ready, ready to go, or on a pathway to another career. Maybe it's a career in some vocation. To do that, though, you've got to really start early. One of the real tragedies is in Ohio that we still have young people throughout the state who are growing up in very difficult circumstances, either because of poverty, it's because somebody in the family is a drug addict, all kinds of things that are totally beyond their control. And they start kindergarten and they're not at the same level with everybody else, and they're behind. And so when you talk about jobs, it may sound strange, but when you talk about jobs, you have to really go back and start early on. So what my running mate and I are going to do when I'm governor is really focus on early childhood development, and particularly with kids who are at risk. I think that we have great career centers, and if our viewers have not been in a career center, I know some of them are going to career centers, but for the adults who might be watching this, if you've not been into your local career center, you should go, because they're doing a very interesting and amazing work. And really part of the key is making sure that the local business community is working closely with the career center so that people can get internships, so that they can get part-time jobs, so they get apprenticeship programs, and the meshing of those two, the business community and the career center, makes a big difference.
We're going to have time to unpack a lot of the different things that you just said.
I was all
there.
over the place.
No, but we're going to have time to dive into that. But first, let's go to Mary with our first video question.
Okay, so this question is about everyone's favorite subject, testing.
Hi, my name's Ariana. I'm from Cincinnati, and I attend Diamond Oaks, one of Great Oaks' career campuses, as a health technology student. In recent years, more and more of school has been dedicated to state testing. This year, I have been pulled from my medical training on several occasions to be tested. What are your thoughts as to the value of this testing?
All right, state testing, it's been a big thing. We've been talking about high school diplomas a lot and what it takes to get a high school diploma. So when it comes to state testing, are we tested too much here?
Yes, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I was fascinated by looking at Ariana, and I saw the dummy in the bed back there, and you could see that she was really into her medical training. We test too much. We have to test because we have to know how our kids are doing. If you're a parent, you're going to want to know how your kids are doing. You have to know how your school is doing. But it's abundantly clear from talking to teachers and from talking to students that so much is focused on that. I think something else, she made a very, very good point, that sometimes, particularly with young people who are on a specific career track, the state is requiring them to take certain courses I would be more inclined to give more flexibility for these students who are on a particular track, because sometimes it's difficult for them to get all of the courses. In her case, it would be courses related to health and medicine. And that slows young people down many times. So I think we have to be very careful in Columbus, with all good intentions, to having a bunch of requirements, but sometimes those requirements really don't work for that individual person, and for them to succeed and be able to utilize their passion, we need to give them more flexibility, frankly.
And some of the ideas you're talking about are things that have been proposed at the State Board of Education very recently. But when it comes to changing these types of things like testing, you've got the State Board of Education, you have the legislature, you have the governor's office. How do you bring all of that together in order to really reduce testing?
Well, Andy, you're absolutely right. I mean, the challenge to do anything, we can talk about it, but you also then have to get it done. Throughout my career, I've been able to pull Republicans and Democrats together. I have a long history of doing that. I believe that I can do that with the state legislature. It is respecting their opinions, is listening to them, but it's also working very, very closely with them. As you indicated to our audience, when I started, one of my career started as a prosecutor, but I spent 20 years in the U.S. Congress, so eight years in the U.S. House, 12 years in the U.S. Senate, and I was able to get a lot done. I got it done by reaching across the aisle. I mean, just give you an example. I worked on foster care issues. I always knew that Jay Rockefeller, Democrat from West Virginia, cared about foster care. So I would go to him and talk about these issues. Dick Durbin, someone who's different from me on the political spectrum. He's a Democrat for our audience. He's a Democrat from Illinois, one of the leaders of the Democrat Party. But he and I really had a passion to help people who had AIDS, both in the United States and in other countries. And so we always were able to find a path to do that. So I think that, yes, we do have a State Board of Education. We do have a state legislature. I think a lot of this is just figuring out where there's a common ground and to accomplish what we want. I mean, take testing, for example. You could go into any room in Ohio, and 9 out of 10 people are going to say, we have too much testing, particularly if they're parents, particularly if they're students. They have somebody in there, or they have a grandchild in school. So I think there's an emerging consensus on this. There's also emerging the fact, clearly, that we still have to test. We have to know what's going on. So I just think there's common ground. I spent my lifetime pulling people together, and I think I can do it.
All right, along the same lines, Kelly from Fremont via the web is asking, how do you propose modernizing our antiquated education system to meet the present-day needs of the job market?
Yeah, let me talk about the career centers just first, because we were talking about them. I think they're doing a good job, but we need to help them more. The career centers are really disadvantaged by current Ohio law in regard to the Facilities Commission and what the money that they can get to do expansion or to build new. And also to get equipment. They have to have the most up-to-date equipment. So we will work on to changing that when I'm governor of the state, to give them the access to do that. I think we also have to do a better job making sure technology is in every classroom. Technology is not everything, and I want to be very clear about that. I remember what my high school principal told us. My then girlfriend Fran and I were in juniors, and we were getting ready to go into a new school building, and he said, this is a beautiful new building, it's great, but I want you to remember something. In education, there's two things that are the most important, and that is a student who wants to learn and a good teacher. So, we don't want to bypass the teachers. They're the ones who make a difference every single day, but technology can help them. Technology can facilitate how they teach. We have 8 children, and all of our kids do different things. They're all very different. But our youngest son, Mark, was for a number of years an inner city school teacher. Today he's an assistant principal, also in Cleveland. But it's learning from them, going in, seeing into their classroom, as well as going into classrooms of others, that the technology can be a real tool for teachers and to really help them. So we've got to put a lot of emphasis on that. And if you look at the platform that my running mate John Houston and I have put out, that's one of the things that we emphasize is technology.
Well, Wyatt from Cincinnati via the web is asking, What is your plan to make a high school diploma mean something again? We were just kind of talking about that a little bit, where there are these rigid standards when it comes to testing, but they're still trying to raise the level when it comes to what a high school diploma means.
Well, I think a high school diploma shows that you have completed, you've run the race, you've done what you should do. I think the challenge is when someone graduates from high school and they're not going to college and they're not going to they don't know where they're going. And I think that's where we have trouble. An 18-year-old who doesn't know where they're going, and I'm not saying every 18-year-old knows where they're going, and I certainly didn't, but you want them to have a clear pathway. And I think part of that is starting early in life and exposing young people to all the different possible jobs that are out there. I run the State Crime Lab. The State Crime Lab, we do, for our audience, we do all the things that you see done on TV in all the crime shows. It's absolutely amazing what our great scientists do there. But after I became Attorney General, I thought, you know, I really want young people to know that there are real jobs here. That's not just TV, that we can solve crimes every single day, and there are scientists who are making a good living and who, even more important than that, are really doing some very meaningful things. So we came up with the idea of what we called our BCI. BCI is what our crime lab is called. BCI Crime School, BCI School. And we're not teaching kids about crime, but what we're teaching them is how to solve a crime. But the whole idea is, this one happens to be geared for fourth graders. And they solve a hypothetical case. Farmer goes missing with his dog Buckeye, and then there's all kinds of adventures and things. But what the kids do is hands-on, fourth grade appropriate experiments. And I've gone into classes where kids have done this, and when you talk to these kids, they're really excited because it's been hands-on. They've helped solve a crime. They've learned something about the crime lab itself. And when you ask them then, you know, are you interested in science? You know, everybody's hand goes up. Now, I'm not saying they're all going to be scientists, and not saying that, you know, any of that class may end up at our state crime lab working, but it broadens their horizon. We live in a world where our kids they're very worldly because they're on the internet. And they're seeing all kinds of things, and that's wonderful to some extent. But I'm not sure they always are aware of all the different kind of jobs that are out there. And so, starting early, just to expose children, and they get older, to what jobs are out there, because ultimately, you know, what we should want for every child in Ohio is what I want for my children, I want for my grandchildren. And that is, I want them to find something they love to do, something they're good at, something they have a real passion for. And their life will be a lot better. They'll make a good living, but they'll also be doing something every day that they love. But it's broadening those horizons, and I think we actually have to work at this every day. Manufacturing, for example. Manufacturing, the stereotype of manufacturing in someone's mind, if they have not been into a manufacturing company lately, is it's dirty, it's dusty, it's, you know, very, very horrible work. Well, when you go into factories today, many of them are not like that at all. It's very high tech, and so there's some very exciting things that are going on, you know, in that manufacturing company. But exposing kids to that, I just think is important to give them all the options.
Well, let's go back to Mary for another video question.
Great. Our next question is about money, and it's one that many of you are asking. Take a look.
Hi, I'm Ray from Columbus. A lot of students are supporting themselves through college through minimum wage jobs. My question is, would you support the rise in minimum wage?
Ray, good question. I know many of our students are out there working in McDonald's, other places. Could you all just raise your hand? How many of you have a job outside of school now? Whoa. A couple of you.
workers.
You in the green up there. Where do you work? Panera. Panera. What do they pay you?
They pay me about $8.50.
$8.50. Okay. Anybody else want to tell us? Yeah, right in the middle.
I work at a country club, and I make about $8 some
Okay.
He says he works at a country club and makes $8.75.
And the last one over clear on the side there. Public library. What do you make there? Yeah.
$8.30.
Look, I think that it's very few people that the best job they ever had was their first job. And so I think we work through jobs, and part of what we learn by a job, and it's what I learned, is you got to show up on time, you got to be there, and it didn't matter that I was working for my dad and my grandmother and grandfather, you know. We started at 7 o'clock in the morning, and that's where you need to be there at 7 o'clock in the morning. But those experiences are great experiences. I have a grandson, I have a number of grandchildren, but one whose name is David. David works, had worked in at McDonald's for a number of years, and he's advanced there and learned a lot of different things. So we have, the voters of Ohio spoke a few years ago in a constitutional amendment, and they provided for a minimum wage, and there's a mechanism in there in regard to how that gets raised based on cost of living. Always open to taking a look at that, to see whether we should go back to the voters and in any way change that. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to cause people to lose jobs. We don't want that starting job not to be out there. In our home area, we live very close to Young's Jersey Dairy. And at Young's Jersey Dairy, every kid, it seems like in 5 counties, starts their job there. I don't know what they make. They're scooping ice cream. They're learning how to deal with people. It's what the educators call the soft skills. Show up, be nice, do what you need to do, work hard. So I would be concerned about, as we look at talking about raising the minimum wage, we just should be very careful how we do that so that we don't eliminate those jobs. What you're seeing places like McDonald's do, for example, is that they have now kiosks as you go in, and eventually that's going to replace some people who are back working. So it's a balance. It's not easy. And Ray, thank you for the question.
Now, I asked this of your opponent earlier, the idea of having a certain minimum wage for maybe teenagers and then a different minimum wage for adults. Have you ever thought about that, and what would you say to that idea?
The concern I would have is that you distort the market, and you cost people who, it doesn't seem fair. I mean, it doesn't seem fair that we should pay you differently because of who you are. If people pay differently because of what you do, that makes sense. They pay them differently about how many people they can get to do this. And one thing I would say that we are seeing even out there in the fast food land, we're seeing an increase in some places because they have to compete to get employees. And this is a very tight labor market today, very, very tight labor market.
All right. Ian from Cincinnati is on the web, and he's submitted a question asking, schools are paid for by taxes. What commitment are you willing to make to continue paying for career tech schools?
As I indicated, big commitment. I want every child to be truly college ready or on a pathway, a career. And to do that, we've got to have our career tech first rate. The ones I've been in a number of them, I think are doing a very good job. The question is, can we do better? Can we take it to the next level? A lot of that depends on a relationship between the business community and the educators. And when the communities where they are really working together, where the employers are providing internships, apprenticeships, part-time work, all of those things I think are very, very important, because for young people, I think it's important for them to find out what they like, but it's also important for them to find out what they don't like. And so experiences, you go and you do a job and you figure, I don't want to do that job the rest of my life. I don't want to do that job. I want to do something else. But we also see cases where young people find a job and they really love it. And one of the programs that I think is really a neat program is the Cristo Rey School model. There's one in Columbus, one in Cincinnati, one in Cleveland. We actually have some Cristo Rey students at the Attorney General's office. And that, of course, idea is you get a young person, who goes to school 4 days a week and they work 1. And when you talk to the students, what you find out is they're really excited about their job. And they learn a lot from that job. So the mixing of the job and the education and making it more hands-on, I think, is very helpful.
All right, Liz from Cleveland is on Twitter, or I'm sorry, she's through the web. She's asking, how would you keep recent college graduates from leaving Ohio to go to bigger cities for a job?
Well, that's a great question.
Tough one.
Yeah. That's a great question. In Ohio, we have some great state universities. We also have some amazing, good as well, private institutions, colleges. And, you know, that is a real challenge. I think the most important way we can do that is to continue, as we look at our cities, our major cities, you know, look at these cities and say, what else do we have to do to make them world-class cities? What we're seeing right here in Cleveland is we're seeing people move downtown, young people. They like the theater, they like the sports, they like all the things that go with being downtown. And so we're in transformation, not just in Cleveland, but frankly in Cincinnati, in Columbus, other cities. So part of the attraction is we have to make these world-class cities and do everything that we can to continue to make them very, very appealing. Mm-hmm. I think in addition to that, you know, part of it is the economy. We have to have an economy that's growing. If the economy is growing and we're creating new jobs, then there's more opportunities for young people. Somebody gets out of college and they look around and they see there's a job in Cleveland, you know, or a job in Cincinnati, or a job other places. That gives them a real incentive to stay. But it's something that is really, we can really talk a lot about, and if there are other ways through forgiveness of student loans or other things so that we can get our talented young people to stay in Ohio. I mean, one of the areas, for example, is in the area of medicine, whether nurses and others. You know, we can incentivize them to work in areas in Ohio, for example, where there aren't enough nurses, there aren't enough doctors, for example. There's things to always think about that we could be doing.
And kind of going along those lines, there's a question, Son Lee from Cleveland, he says he's from Vietnam, and he was wondering if there's something that can be done to help keep international students in Ohio. You have places like OSU and these other big colleges that attract a lot of international students.
You know, I think certainly one way to do that, and let me just a caveat, part of this is going to be federal policy in regard to immigration. And, you know, as governor, I can certainly speak out on that, but that's more in the line of the 2 U.S. senators and our congressmen that we have. But I think the universities can do a lot, not just for foreign students to keep them here, but also for our own students. I think we should look at how our universities are doing, not just by what percentage they graduate, which is what has happened in the last few years, which I think is a good improvement. Look at how many graduate. But also how many can get a job and how long it takes them to get that job. So I would like to see in our state universities for all of them to do a look back a year later. And if you look back a year later, let's see what schools were able to place these students. And so I think higher education, all education, has got to get much more focused on making sure young people have a career path and they are given real active assistance in getting a job. Nothing more disheartening for a young person than to graduate college, can't find a job. Now, everybody has to do their own initiative, I understand that, but colleges can help. Same way with high schools. Some of the most overworked people in the world are guidance counselors. We've got to increase the number, and we've got to give them some relief because they're doing mostly testing and filling out stuff. And I'm not sure our young people in most schools are getting as much counseling in regard to career as they might. Part of the way to do it is to tie in that guidance counselor with the private sector so that there's a direct contact there.
All right. Let's send it back over to Mary with another video question.
Next up, a question regarding opportunities for higher education for minorities. Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Harry and I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. And my question for the future governor is, what action do you plan on taking to make college a possibility for minorities and young adults living in the inner cities?
Harry, thank you very much for the question. One of the things that we have proposed is to fully fund the fund that was created a number of years ago that provides assistance for college students who are from Ohio who go in the state of Ohio. The name escapes me, and it's Ohio College Opportunity.
The College Opportunity Grant.
So, but we want to fully fund that. And if we can fully fund that, that is going to mean for some college students some significant assistance. The other thing that we have going in Ohio is some great two-year colleges, our community colleges. They're getting tied more and more into our four-year schools. Some of them are branch campuses, but this is a relatively, I say relatively cheap way for students to go to school. If they can get a Pell Grant, for example, in addition to a Pell Grant, if they can get the money from the state, you know, they very well can pay all their tuition, certainly at a two-year college, and in some cases at a four-year college. Now, on top of that, for a four-year college, you usually have room and board, which of course puts the price tag up much higher. But we are blessed in Ohio that we have schools all over Ohio, so that no one has to drive a horrible amount of miles to get to those schools. And so those are opportunities that are out there.
Now there's this, and I know a lot of people who are out in the audience and watching, they're considering what college to go to. The idea of going to a community college, it seems affordable, but I think there's a fear that if they go to maybe a two-year community college, maybe a future employer doesn't consider that as a high-achieving thing compared to maybe a four-year bigger name school. Do you have any thoughts on big name schools compared to small name schools?
Yeah, let me just add one thing from the last question I just thought of. Some states are requiring every student in high school to fill out the FAFSA, which is what you fill out for a student loan. How many of you have filled that out?
The FAFSA?
FAFSA, student loan. What they found in other states is when they required everybody to fill it out, doesn't require anybody to do anything, but they got to fill this out, then more young people were focused on what do I do after high school? What is my advanced education beyond that? And what they found out, many of them found out, is they did in fact qualify for student loan, or more importantly, because loans are kind of getting out of control, but do they qualify for a Pell Grant? Do they qualify for any other grant that might be there from that university? So what I tell young people, my wife Fran and I do a few scholarships for kids in our local county, both the Career Center and our local high school, but when we interview them, what we tell them is fill out the FAFSA, but also explore at your college everything that they might give you. I mean, you have to be aggressive about it. You have to go back to them and talk with them. What else is available? What else can I do to cut down the cost of going to college?
Great. Paige from Perrysburg is on Twitter, and she asks, as a career tech student preparing to enter the workforce in early childhood education, how are you going to ensure, without too much funding, that those teaching in, quote, universal preschools are qualified?
Well, great question. I think it's very important. I'll go back to we talked about a little while ago in early childhood development. And first of all, thank you for being willing to do that. Thank you for having a passion to help young kids. I don't know there's anything more important, or there's any job that's more important than reaching young kids. We are going to dramatically, I say we, Mike DeWine, John Houston, my running mate, when I'm governor, increase the funds for early childhood development. We're going to do it in two ways. We're going to start, first of all, by tripling the number of families that will be eligible for home visits. This is a home visit for a pregnant mom who's a first-time mom who is poor, difficult circumstance, to try to help her, and then continue to try to help her for the next 2, 3, 4 years. The second thing we're going to do is put real emphasis, and this goes directly to your comment, your question, put real emphasis on quality in our preschool classes. The state of Ohio pays through the taxpayers for a number of people because their poverty level is low enough for their children to go to preschool. That's the good news. The bad news is that 80% of those schools are not excellent, or not the highest performing. So What we're going to do is help train and give support to the teachers who are in those schools, and do everything that we can to support raising the quality of those schools. What we have found, and what the studies clearly show, is that while preschool is important, what's really important is quality preschool. That it has to be good, it has to be quality, and there's many things that they judge when they try to figure out whether it's a 5-star, 4-star, or whatever it is. But I will tell you, there's nothing more important than the teaching part of it, and having teachers who really understand what is necessary for that young person, for them to understand and to get.
All right. Well, Celti from Chardon just sent us a question through the web asking, do you have plans for ending job and housing discrimination for LGBTQ people across Ohio?
Well, that's a good question. I'm against any kind of discrimination. I think it is wrong, and I think it is certainly wrong in housing. And I will take a look at that and see what kind of a problem there is, but look at that and see if there are things that should be done, frankly. There should be no discrimination in housing. We enforce in Ohio now the current law, current civil rights law. I say we, the Attorney General's office does. And we file actions many, many times after they come from the Civil Rights Commission. We're involved in litigation for landlords that are discriminating. They're discriminating against someone because of the number of children they have, or that they have children, or all number of other reasons. So this is something that we should not have and tolerate.
Emily from Perrysburg is asking through Twitter, businesses around the state are saying that they are unable to find workers due to the opioid crisis. How do you plan on addressing this?
Well, that's a great question. The opioid crisis is a real huge problem. Let me ask our live audience here. How many of you know somebody or somebody in your family, in your neighborhood, who has had a substance abuse problem? Okay, Andy, how many have raised their hand? It was over half.
A large majority of the crowd.
Large majority. Look, this is a huge, huge problem. There's no magic wand that we wave to get rid of this problem, but I have a 12-point plan that is a holistic plan that I think will make a big difference. Some of the things I've already started doing as Attorney General, but I can do so much more, frankly, as the governor of the state of Ohio. Let me mention a couple of the 12 points. And anybody who wants to find this can go online, MikeDewine.com, and can see all our plans and all the things that I intend to do when I'm governor. One thing we're not doing enough of, now we're doing some of it, but we're not doing enough of, is K through 12 prevention. We need to start in kindergarten and do something that is age appropriate. You're not going to talk to kindergarten kids about heroin, but you might talk to them about not picking up a pill they see around the house, and wellness and other things. And then you just keep doing that every year for 12 years, actually a total of 13 years. The evidence shows that if we do that, and if we're using what's age appropriate every year, but also something that has actually been proven to work, this is no place for amateurs to make up something. You have to use things that have actually worked. You can dramatically decrease the number of people who go down the path of addiction. You don't get rid of it, but you can take it down there as well. I would mention one other thing. We need more treatment. And the real concern, while we're funding a lot of treatment, Medicaid is funding a lot of treatment, but the real challenge I have found is after that person comes out of, quote, treatment, then where do they go? And if they go back to the same neighborhood and the same friends, it makes it very difficult for them to stay sober. So there have to be halfway houses, whatever you want to call them, and different programs. And that's where a DeWine administration will focus a lot of our energy in helping that recovery after the person comes out of the treatment.
All right. Mary, I hear we have another video question.
Yeah, our next question is about helping non-traditional students find their pathways to success.
My name is Sarah, and I'm from Cincinnati. I will soon be graduating from Cincinnati State Technical and Community College. I am a single parent, and even getting a 2-year degree has been very hard for me. So my question to you is, what is your vision in providing support for non-traditional students and for working parents so that we can still succeed in higher education and in any other career pathways?
Great question. She's described, I couldn't hear everything, but she was describing a situation as a working parent, as a parent who has gone to college, coming out of that college. Look, I think there's a number of different things. There's nothing one thing that is magical, but one of the things that we need to be able to provide her is childcare. And we have, depending on her income, my goal is to expand by at least 20,000 in the first year the number of families that are eligible for that child care. As I said before, it's important that child care be good, high quality, because that's going to make a difference in her children. It is also important, I believe, that her school, and this is true all the way through, that her school be of great assistance and focus on helping her get a job. I really believe, and I said this before, but I really, really believe we need to start judging our colleges and our two-year schools based upon how well they're doing in preparing someone for a real job in the real world, and where are they 6 months later or 12 months later.
Hannah is on Twitter and she's asking, the Mahoning Valley is known as the Steel Valley, but many jobs have moved out. How would you as governor bring those types of important jobs back here and other industrial things to the state?
Hannah, that's a great question. I've spent a lot of time in the Mahoning Valley over the years. It's a great place with some really amazing and great people. It was hit very hard, a few decades ago. But what I see in the valley is the valley's coming back, and it's coming back in many ways. There's an incubator there, jobs incubator, business incubator, which is very good. What I will do is take what's called Jobs Ohio. Let me ask this: how many of you know what Jobs Ohio is? Okay, we got a few. Quickly for the rest of you, Jobs Ohio is a program that was put together by Governor Kasich, and he basically privatized the economic development part of the administration, funded it through revenue from the liquor tax, liquor sales. But what I will do is work with the local community and use Jobs Ohio as a great instrument. I think Governor Kasich's done a great job with that. We will take it to the next level. We will work very closely with the leadership in the Mahoning Valley to do everything we can to bring jobs in the Mahoning Valley. A last commitment, sometimes there's calls that only the boss can make. As governor of the state, there will be some times when I'm the only one that can call a CEO and say, we really want you to come to Ohio. What do we need to do? How can we smooth things so that you can come? It's the same way with companies that are already here. I can be on the phone and say, what do you need? Because we want to keep you here. So I will be a very active, very active executive, particularly in regard to jobs for the state.
We've run out of time, but do you want to briefly say anything to the audience and the people watching about these are young people who have really engaged themselves today?
Well, thank you all very much. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it, and it is just, you have a great future ahead of you. When I look up here, I think about my own kids, my own grandkids. As I said, Fran and I have 23 grandkids. We got 4 who are in college right now, 1 in graduate school, and we got 4 who are in high school and others who are in grade school. And what I want for you is what I want for my own kids, my own grandkids, and that is that you be able to live up to your God-given potential, that you be able to live the American dream, however you define that dream. And we need to do everything we can to give you the tools and the help and the assistance so that you truly can, in fact, do that. And that's my commitment to you. I will always think of young people because I'm surrounded all the time with my own young people and see their ambitions and see their dreams. And there's nothing that is more important than your dreams, and we need to do everything we can to help you fulfill those dreams.
All right. Well, sit right there. Before we wrap up our discussion with Mike, Mary has some information on what we can expect to see when you vote next month. Mary?
I'd like to remind everyone that in addition to the Democratic and Republican candidates for governor, 2 other candidates are on the ballot next month. The Libertarian Party candidate is Travis Irvine, and Constance Goodell Newton is running on the Green Party ticket. If you'd like information on the platforms and positions of these candidates, visit their websites. And remember, you've got less than a week now to register to vote. Stop by your table downstairs and we'll hook you up. Andy?
Thanks, Mary. Well, that's going to wrap us up for our forum. Ohio Attorney General and Republican gubernatorial candidate Mike DeWine, I'd like to thank you for taking part of the program today.
Thank you, Andy, very much.
And thank you as well to my colleague Mary Fecto, to our co-producers Mark Lammers from CET in Cincinnati and Brent Davis at WOSU in Columbus. But most of all, the biggest thank you goes to all of you here in our studio audience and everyone watching on the live stream. Thank you for participating in Talking Jobs with Ohio's next governor. You're the future of Ohio, and it's vitally important for you to stay informed and involved and engaged, so thank you. I'm Andy Chow from the Ohio Public Radio and Television State House News Bureau.
Obviously, you saw the cameras.